This is the true story of one night in Cleveland, Ohio in June of 1974. A story told by those who were there that night 50 years ago. It wasn't just any night. It was 10-cent beer night.
Streakers running out there. The crowd had the beer truck to ourselves.
And the father and son went out to center field and mooned the crowd.
Women exposing their breasts. As it ended up, it was a poor decision on my part. Naked people sliding into second base.
This has been a night of blatant stupidity.
It did sound like a good idea at the time.
In the 1970s, Cleveland, Ohio was known around the world for three things: the Cuyahoga River catching on fire, Mayor Ralph Perk's hair catching on fire, and our baseball team never catching fire.
Saturday afternoon at 2 on TV8, the Cleveland Indians.
Poor records and poor attendance led to rumors that the Cleveland Indians might actually leave town.
In the early 70s, Cleveland was in trouble. The whole city was in trouble. And so we were out to save the Indians, we were out to save downtown.
In 1974, Carl Fazio Jr. was the Indians' director of sales and marketing.
So we really pulled out all stops to try and make an impression and really improve the Indians' attendance.
Together with promotions director Jackie York, Indians management told them to do whatever it took to get fans to the ballpark.
Well, we had a lot of great promotions, and we had a money scramble. We had jacket days, we had hat days, we had ball days, we had farmers' days where the players would actually get on the field and they would milk the cows.
But one promotion stood out from the rest.
Beer night was one of 50-some events that we put on to bring families and fans back to the stadium, back to see the Cleveland Indians baseball.
Not just beer night, 10-cent beer night.
God, I wish this didn't happen.
Now, before we get to what happened on June 4th, 1974, when the Indians played the Texas Rangers, we need to go back 6 days earlier when the same two teams met in Texas. Mike Hargrove was in his rookie season playing for the Rangers.
Milt Wilcox, for some reason, was trying to hit Lenny Randle.
The reason Indians pitcher Milt Wilcox was trying to hit Lenny Randle? According to Milt, it was all Gaylord Perry's fault.
The night before, he pitched against Texas, and he beat him. The next morning in the paper, Lenny got lucky and got a couple of hits off of him. And he was popping off about how Gaylord Perry was all washed up. I was pitching the next day, and he walks over to me. He says, "Can you do me a favor?" And I go, "Hey, he's a great friend of mine." I said, "Whatever you want, Gaylord." He says, "I want you to nail him the first time up." And I said, "What do you mean nail him?" He said, "I want you to put one right in his ribs, and then point to me in the dugout."
Ranger Hall of Famer Fergie Jenkins remembers it well.
He ended up throwing at him. The end result is Lenny's going to lay down a bunt down the first baseline, which he did, but instead of running to first, he ran towards Milt Wilcox and just ran right over top of him.
I didn't have much time to think because he's a very fast guy anyway, I look up and he's right in front of me, and I just had enough time to brace myself, and it knocked me down. And I get up and I'm going to throw the ball to first base, and I see that John Ellis has got him in a bear hug. And then I think Dave Duncan was our catcher. I think Dave was out there, and he had him, and we had some pretty big guys on that team too.
Ran out and probably tried to hold people back. Yeah, but the two main culprits were both, as I said, Wilcox and Lenny Randle.
Everybody, the bullpen's empty, the dugout's empty, everything was just a mess. And then that's about the last thing I remember.
Because Lenny was a punt returner for Arizona State. So this is how it all started. And then a melee fight on the field with Alex Johnson and so many guys from both ball clubs.
Then it broke up. It was sad that it happened, but the sadder fact is that when the Indians went to their dugout, some Texas fan, took a whole big cup of beer and threw it on Dave Duncan's head. Dave was catching for the Indians, and that just made it a lot worse.
A lot worse is right. If you look closely at the video, you can see the Indians' Oscar Gamble throw a bat into the stands. Sports writer Dan Coughlin says the incident in Texas lit the fuse for what would happen 1 week later in Cleveland.
It was a pretty bad fight, and Indians players remembered those fans were pouring Pearl beer on them and everything. Bad blood started there. Billy Martin, of course, was the manager of the Rangers. And anytime you're looking for a fight, Billy's usually in the middle of it.
Billy Martin was always a loudmouth anyway. Nobody really paid much attention to Billy Martin.
After the fight in Texas, Billy Martin was asked if he was worried about retaliation the next week in Cleveland. Billy said, quote, "They don't have enough fans there to worry about."
Oh, and Pete Franklin was the big radio star at the time, and he started promoting that game on the air. And referring to, of course, the fight the week before, Franklin promoted this as a revenge against the Rangers.
We had a who was the element of getting people excited.
The radio talk shows in Cleveland built it up. I think that was probably what started what happened eventually with the 10 Cent Beer Night.
I think in the press they had said it's going to be Billy Martin, Hit Billy Martin Day in Cleveland.
So now a recipe for trouble is coming together. Two teams that didn't like each other, one fiery manager, an outrageous sports talk host, and don't forget the final ingredient, lukewarm draft beer. Up next, the fights.
And reached out and punched me in the jaw.
And the forfeit.
The fans on the field, they picked up the bases and walked out with them.
10 Cent Beer Night comes to a head next.
Open your door to a gorgeous Nature Stone garage floor. Stop wasting money on flimsy, overpriced paints and coatings that just don't last. Get Nature Stone and never replace your garage flooring again. Eliminate slippery puddles, correct cracked uneven concrete, and stop tracked in dirt. Plus, it's the only garage floor backed by a true unconditional warranty and our exclusive Russell's Promise satisfaction guarantee. June only, we're making huge deals for Dad with savings up to 50% off any garage floor. Schedule your free cost estimate today at naturestone.com. It's not just a floor, wow, it's Nature Stone.
Here at Finesse Foot Care, we're really excited to be able to offer this option for patients to treat their fungus. We're one of a few practices in the Cleveland area that has this device. It takes about 12 minutes or so per treatment, and over time the new nail grows out clear and healthy. You can schedule your appointment by calling our office or going on our website at finessefootcare.com.
Welcome to MK's Liquidation Surplus.
Some of the best quality products on the market for a fraction of the price.
Furniture, appliances, and flooring at 30 to 50% off what you'll find at the big box stores.
Come shop names you'll recognize, including Z-Line and Ashley's Furniture.
With over 30,000 square foot of inventory, we've got you covered.
We'll save you money and get you the best deals on the market.
We offer warranties, financing, and same-day delivery.
MKH Liquidations, we got you covered.
Play along to see how your brain stacks up to the rest of the country.
Do not feel ashamed. You're as stupid as I am.
The 1% Club, all new Monday on Fox.
On June 4th, 1974, the #1 song in the pop music charts was... On that very same day, the Cleveland Indians held 10 Cent Beer Night at Cleveland Municipal Stadium. The song would prove to be prophetic.
Jackie York was so fun about after that. She was the Indians' promotion director.
Well, we averaged over 55 to 60 promotions a year.
She sensed that there was something wrong because back then, the people who came every night were the same people, and you got to know them. You recognized the faces. And that night, there were new faces. Where did these people come from? And half of them were drunk. And so she sensed that there was something going to go wrong there.
Carl and I were walking in the grandstand in the concourse area, and people were coming in, and we had a great walk-up. And the audience was different. The people that were coming in were different. We recognized the fact that it was a different crowd.
Hi, my name's Terry Yurkic. 50 years ago,
I was at the 10-cent beer night riot. I was 19 years old and I was in college at Cleveland State. We had gone to a lot of games and we just wanted to go to the 10-cent beer night.
I was off that day, and so I decided to participate with everybody else. I had a few beers that night in the press box, and suddenly I realized that this is going to be a working day for me.
Well, at first it was comical. You know, it really was kind of comical.
At first it was, you know, a lot of laughs. Really a lot of laughs.
It started with, you know, with a couple of fans jumping out on the field. You know, the bullpens were down the right field and left field lines. And a couple of fans in between innings would jump down and run from one bullpen over the other, like up in the stands, or start out to sticks. And it was, you know, by the time everything happened, it was a bunch. I didn't count them, but I would say that at least 50, 60 people were running back and forth.
Progressively during the game, it started getting a little crazier, but about the fourth inning where we were, the beer trucks, it was a real long line, so people put tables and threw them to the side, and there were that were manning the truck, and they just left. And so the crowd had the beer truck to ourselves, so we were filling our own containers, and when the tap would run dry, somebody would jump up and tap another keg, and so it was self-serve.
We had fans running across the field and mooning the crowd and a couple of streakers, but what really was the break-off for me was when a fan runs across the field and the police try to catch him. And here's this kid that's fast as you can imagine, and here's these three older, overweight policemen with these belts on with bullets and walkie-talkies and billy clubs, and they're trying to hold that stuff as they run after the kid, and the kid's just running circles around three policemen. The crowd is roaring, so it's a total breakdown of authority. I knew right then.
There was something going on every inning. Streakers running out there, women exposing their breasts, naked people sliding into second base. That's a hell of a strawberry.
Had a streaker that the security guards chased down. They never caught him. He jumped over the fence. I remember this. The guy had 2 black socks on. That's all he had on. And as he jumped to get over the fence, one of the cops got to him and grabbed him and came down with one sock in his hand. So that guy took off with one black sock into the center field section. And I'm assuming that they caught him once that happened.
The police had their walkie-talkies, and they were telling them as this guy was running along the outfield fence, looking for a chance to jump over the fence, escape. They had the police on the other side, which he couldn't see, with a big trash bag, a monster bag. They're getting reports, where was this guy? So they were following along, and this guy finally jumps the fence, and they put him in this huge bag and dragged him off. It was good.
For kids, everybody played with fireworks. It was becoming just constant, the fireworks going off, and you could feel the atmosphere and the mood changing. In between innings, people would jump on the field, run the bases, sliding into bases, and the game kept going on.
Very quickly, the fun of 10-cent beer night took a turn, and 19-year-old Tribe fan Terry Yurkic was one of the reasons why.
9th inning, and we had moved over to right field, and again, standing on the home run, and it just came into my head. I saw Jeff Burrows' hat, and I says, I want to get a souvenir.
Now there's another group of morons running around in the outfield.
So I jumped onto the field and ran up behind Jeff Burrows and just swiped at it to get the hat, and I had it in my hand, and I dropped it. And so I knelt down to pick it up, and I looked up, and he looked at me, and I said, oh, hell.
I turned around and watched him. Instead of fans running on by Jeff like they'd done the whole game, they gathered around him and were picking at him and trying to grab his hat and his glove.
And so I stood up to run, and he kicked me right in the thigh, left perfect spike marks, and he fell down. Billy Martin thought he had gotten hurt, and he hadn't. He just slipped. But he told the Rangers, get some bats, and they started running out to right field towards me. So I took off towards the left field, where the grounds crew would come through. I just got back up into the bleachers. I had escaped.
By the top of the 9th, when it was totally out of hand, I figured I'm back to work tonight, yes.
Once the gate was open and people just rushed onto the field, and then they started coming over the fence at the lower level, regular box seats, and at that point, it was massive humanity. It was just out of control. And so I just stayed up there, and I could see the fighting going on. There was a massive humanity on the field.
This has been a night of blatant stupidity.
Indians were batting in the bottom of the ninth with the tying and winning runs on base and only one out, as I recall. We were about to win the game.
But by that time, the umpires had seen enough. A Cleveland comeback that became a 5-5 tie in the top of the ninth would now become a forfeit. Rangers 9, Indians 0.
Well, the problem was the forfeit, was that they couldn't resume the game because they had already stolen all 3 bases. People walked out with the fans on the field, they'd picked up the bases and walked out with them.
Finally stopped the game, cleared the field, and restored some order before the mounted police finally showed up at the end.
And even though he was the starting pitcher for the Rangers that night, Hall of Famer Fergie Jenkins had no idea what the game turned into.
I'm backing up third because Lenny Randall's playing third. He came in from third, the bag, to cut the ball off, and I was standing still by the bag. He backed up on me and spiked me. And I ended up having my foot cut pretty bad. Back then we all wore spikes. Billy Martin takes me out of the game. Clubhouse kid's gonna take me to a clinic, so I'm gonna get my foot stitched up. I'm sitting on a gurney. Within 5 minutes, doors break open and people are coming in there with a towel wrapped around their head. A woman
When the dust settled, Ferg wasn't the only one. 7 people were sent to the emergency room, 9 people were arrested, and 60,000 beers were consumed.
Long after the game that night, there were about 8, 9, 10 teenagers on top of the Rangers dugout, chanting for them to come on out and fight. And so I went up to them with my reporter's notebook clearly visible in my hand, and I asked them, what are you trying to prove? Because the Rangers have left. They had already got them out of the stadium in a bus. They didn't really say anything, but one kid behind another one reached out and punched me in the jaw. I didn't even feel it. The kid had nothing on the punch. Later on, I heard that it was a kid from Cathedral Latin. And so, but they, of course, the Latin people denied it because that's humiliating for them. That we threw a punch and you didn't even feel it? What an embarrassment that is.
Next, the aftermath.
I remember they kept us in the locker room, seemed like forever.
And one fan's apology.
It was a bad idea by a young boy that really learned his lesson.
The Hangover from 10 Cent Beer Night. Next.
It's coming. Predicted to be one of the hottest summers ever. And you can't. So what do? You stop the hot air from coming in and you're cool from leaking out. With USA Premium Foam in your walls, your old hot and humid house really can be made comfortable. Call now, and when we foam your walls, we'll insulate your attic for free. Stop sweating and start saving.
USA Insulation.
Have you tried training your dog, but nothing seems to work? Sid Dog Training offers day training, so you can drop your dog off in the morning, we'll train throughout the day, and you'll get your lesson at pickup. Sorry, we don't train husbands, wives, or kids.
Thank you, Cleveland,
for making Fox 8 News #1 again.
If you watch us on air
or turn to us online,
morning, noon,
and night,
you've made Fox 8 News
your #1 choice every time.
Thank you, Northeast Ohio.
Cleveland's own Fox 8 News.
You think the foam finger's a little too much?
I got a bigger one in my truck.
We all call Lou Maglio the mayor of the newsroom. He loves people. He loves to make people laugh. I can hear him laughing in the green room right now. You're listening in on my interview. Yes, I could hear you. He's listening. Yes, he heard me say that.
Tracy McCool and Lou Maglio, weeknights at 6 on Fox 8 News.
I've been here for 44 years. Steph has been here over 30 years. Todd over 20 years. Scott over 20 years. Christy, she's been here nearly, 13, 14 years. 150 years of experience just on the morning show. If that's not Cleveland's own, I don't know what is.
Tickets for the St. Jude Dream Home have sold out, but you can still be a winner. Tour the home in Mayfield Village. And while you're there, register to win a $10,000 shopping spree from Northeast Factory Direct. And don't miss the second chance to win. You can get all the details at dreamhome.org.
It's your chance to win great prizes. Tune in on weekday mornings for the Fox 8 Coffee Quiz, brought to you by Window World. For windows, doors, siding, or gutters, choose Window World, America's exterior remodeler.
Not only do we stand behind our windows,
we stand on them.
Asking the tough questions, getting you answers. Cleveland's own Fox 8 I-Team.
After the game was forfeited, the process of getting players and fans to safety began.
There was so little security there, so little police presence until the riot squad came and I saw gas going off, and that really started to take control of the crowd.
You know, in truth, had the Indian players not come out and helped us get out of that, it could have turned really ugly. But they did come out, and we were real thankful for that. And at least we got back to the infield and the pitchers. Everybody gathered around the pitcher's mound pretty much. And I looked up out towards center field, and I felt like Custer in the last stand, because it was just a wave, a mob of fans running straight at us. Most of them stopped before they got to the mound, but there were a few that decided to come on, keep it going.
I'll go to my grave believing that Billy Martin led his team out of the dugout to get the forfeit. He was not going to lose a game that he was winning 5-1 3 innings ago.
As the Rangers were leaving, there were some boxes near the door of the little baseball bats. Not long before that, had been bat night at the stadium. And so they had a lot of extra bats there. All the Rangers grabbed a bat on their way out to get on their bus. Not as a souvenir, but as a defense measure.
I remember they kept us in the locker room, seemed like forever. We had showered and dressed and ready to go. And I want to say we were in the clubhouse. The police kept us in there for at least 2 hours, 3 hours after the game. Got on the bus and told everybody that when we got to the hotel that we were to go to our rooms and not come down until noon the next day. So we all went to bed hungry that night.
A lot of people began leaving in the 7th inning. They got out of there with their little kids. Of course, there was a mob then to get on the rapid transit out of the terminal tower. And so there were so many people at one time on those trains, they weren't prepared for it for after the game. So they overloaded the RTA trains, and the load was too much. And one of the motors on one of those RTA cars burned out, and it was smoke filled the car.
It was too bad that it happened, because it was a good night, and I think we were going to win that game. People
wondered, where were the police? They had the normal number of police on hand. What they needed was a battalion of infantrymen. They could never have anticipated that.
In those days, our security force were ushers. Our ushers were middle-aged, older, retired men making a few bucks on the side. Certainly no security force that we're used to today. And by contract, our ushers and our policemen, half of them approximately, would leave after the 5th inning.
For Indians management, the questions began. Where did it all go wrong?
We regrouped. Certainly it garnered a lot of attention. Ted Bonda, who's president of the ball club, was there. How do we address the media? How do we address the public? And it was a time that we had to be a little bit more introspective about all of that.
In the minutes right after the game, it's been forfeited, and the other media is grabbing Ted Bonda and a couple others for a press conference right after the game, and they're peppering Ted Bonda with questions about how they screwed up and how they're just hammering him. And at one point, Ted said, "Guys, wait a minute, you're giving beer a bad name."
Well, we knew this was national news and this was going to be an awful situation, and so we all felt bad about that, obviously, and wondered what we could have done differently and how we could have anticipated it better.
Now at this point, you might be thinking, that was the end of all 10-cent beer nights in Cleveland.
They did the second beer night. They had 2 or 3 more beer nights scheduled. And so they had all sorts of police on hand for the next one.
We wanted to show that it wasn't the promotion that was bad, it was just the crazy circumstances that surrounded this one game.
It was not only Indians management that had regrets. 50 years later, Terry Yurkic, the young fan who charged into the outfield but who never did get Jeff Burroughs' hat, has a message for the Rangers right fielder.
I regret what happened. I regret coming onto that field and being part of the bad ending of that night, and just it was a bad idea by a young boy that really learned his lesson.
All these years later, all the stories about 10 Cent Beer Night, what often gets lost is this.
Number one, to understand that this was about saving baseball in Cleveland and helping to save the city.
That was a tough thing to do, was to move on from that for not only the people in Cleveland, but nationally and internationally, and has taken decades. And God bless the organizations that have worked very hard to improve on the image.
So what started out as a plan to save baseball in Cleveland lives on to this day. The Indians, now Guardians, and their fans around the world have even embraced the memory through t-shirts, mugs, and other memorabilia. For the 25,134 fans who witnessed 10 Cent Beer Night 50 years ago, the beer-soaked memories of that night will never be forgotten.
It did sound like a good idea at the time.
And one of those bottles should have to fall. There'll be 98 bottles of beer on the wall. 98 bottles of beer on the wall. 98 bottles of beer. And if one of those bottles should have to fall, there'll be 97 bottles of beer on the wall. 97 bottles of beer on the wall. 97 bottles of beer. And if one of those bottles should happen to fall, there'll be 96 bottles of beer on the wall. 96 bottles of beer on the wall. 96 bottles of beer. And if one of those bottles should happen to fall, there'll be 95 bottles of beer on the wall. 95 bottles of beer on the wall. 95 bottles of beer. And if one of those bottles should happen to fall, there'll be 94 bottles of beer on the wall. 94 bottles of beer on the wall. 94 bottles of beer. And if one of those bottles should happen to fall, there'll be 93 bottles of beer.